My name is Courtney Brummel and I am a student at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln Bee Lab, and today I'm going to talk to you about native bees and what they are. So first of all, most people know about honeybees. They produce honey, which we eat, but did you know that in the state of Nebraska we have over 500 different species of bees that don't produce honey? That's right. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the native bees that are in Nebraska, how you can help them, what you can plant, and finally how you can build a habitat for them in your own backyard. Alright, so this is a stem. This is an example of a house that you could put stems in for those stem nesting bees. So this is going to be similar to what we're making today, right? Just a wood structure that you can put different stems in. You can even put paper straws. Don't put plastic straws because those also will work. The important thing with these is you want to make sure that you have a back, because you don't want to have two openings within the stem. That's just not a natural part of their habitat, and bees don't like to nest when there's two cavities. They just want one. And so what we've done is we've used some Phragmites, and we'll talk more later about different stem nesting material that you can use in your own backyard. You don't need to go and buy paper straws. There's plenty of things that are just out in nature, which is a more natural nesting material for these wild bees. So you could also tell that a bee has inhabited these different dwellings, whether it's stem or the wood blocks, because you can see how they're capped off at the very end. All the different native bees, they feed and use different nesting material. So you'll see different colors, and that means that there's different kinds of native bees living within that residence. So if it's green, usually that means it's a leaf cutter bee, because they go out and they'll cut a little semicircle off of leaves, and then they use that to stuff their nest and cap it. So people want to help the bees, and there's a couple ways you could do that. One is planting more native plants in your own backyard. We'll talk about some of the different species that you can plant. The important things with plants is making sure that you are accounting for seasonality. So you want to have plants that are going to bloom in the spring, early summer, late summer, and fall, so that bees have food year round. And the other thing you can provide is habitat. By planting native plants, you're already providing habitat for bees, because that's where they normally live. But you can also, if you want to be a little crafty and do some woodworking, you can make your own wild bee nest. So a lot of people have seen different wild bee nests in stores, but the thing is that those are not always the right dimensions and the right material. So what do I mean by that? When you make a wild bee nest, you want to make sure that you use preservative-free lumber. What kind of wood should you use? Pretty much anything except cedar. Cedar has natural insect repellent properties, so you don't want to use cedar. So pine, spruce, oak are all really good materials. All right, so before we get started building our own wild bee nest, there's a few more things to keep in mind. And these are just some fun facts too. So when people ask you, well, why do you use these dimensions? You could tell them why. So native bees, they need a certain depth within their tunnels, which is why we've created it to be this size. So we'll provide those exact dimensions for you, but you just need to know that your tunnels need to be at least 3 to 5 inches deep, okay? And we'll also provide the different dimensions of, if you want to include some wood blocks with holes drilled in them, we'll include the dimensions for that. And there's research proving that the diameter of those holes from a certain range is the best for native bees. Okay, so again, to reiterate, you want to make sure that you have a back on your wild bee nest, and a roof is also ideal because it'll help keep moisture from going inside the nesting material. You can have a flat roof like this, or you can have a slope roof. The benefit of having this flat roof is that you can have more nesting material fit inside the nest, okay? Another really important thing to note, if you're going to include the wood block, is that when you drill, you want to make sure that those holes do not have a rough interior. So drill with a really sharp bit and make sure that those tunnels are perpendicular to the wood grain, okay? And another reason that we have this structure is we want to make sure that all of our nesting materials are removable for annual cleaning. This is important and why some of those permanent structures that you can buy in stores are not very efficient and they're not suitable for wild bees, because you want to be able to remove that nesting material and put in new clean nesting material to avoid parasitism and other issues and diseases that native bees will experience when that nesting material is used up year after year.
Hi, my name is Sheldon Brummel. I'm with the University of Nebraska Lincoln Bee Lab, and today I'm going to be showing you guys how to build a native bee nest. So I'm going to start with 5 pieces. I'm going to have a roof, 2 sides, a bottom, and a back. So all the pieces should be included on your cut list, and now I'm going to show you guys how we assemble them. So the main thing you want to do is, if you have it bowed in a certain direction, you want to make sure that that bow is facing in so that water gets shed away and not in so that it gets trapped in a corner. So I'm going to check to make sure all my wood is as straight as it can be, and if it has a curve, I'm going to face that curve out. And I mocked up all my pieces to make sure that they fit, and then now I'm going to start attaching them. I would recommend pre-drilling a small hole so that they fit in nice and snug, just on the part that you're starting with. And that'll just help you too, and you're not on as straight as you can be. Then you can start to pull it in to snug it in a little bit better. So you're going to do one side. I'm going to push this in when I hammer the next piece. There it is. And then this is the hole drilled in the back so you can hang it up like a birdhouse. So there's your complete bee nest, and you can have your overhang be a little longer, or you can have it a little shorter, but you need to have just enough that if your stem nests protrude a little bit, then they won't get wet. So now that you have your bee nest house completed, you've got to fill it with material, but let's check to see where we want to mount this first. So I'm going to pretend this is my house or a shed or just somewhere. So anywhere that you'd want to basically have a birdhouse is where this can fit as well. So you need to be getting morning sun. You need to make sure that there's no wind or snow or craziness that's going to blow into this or blow this off of what it's attached to. Don't attach it to tree trunks or have overhanging shade. You want to get good sun on it. It doesn't need to be in full sun necessarily, but having it face south, southeast, or southwest is always preferable. So right here, this is going to be attached, and let's just say this is a shed. I'm going to mount it about head height, because remember, if we're putting this out of the way, what's the point? We want to be able to see the bees going in and out and be actually able to enjoy what we've made. So I'm going to put it somewhere where I can see it or kids can see it, but you don't want to be putting it so low on the ground that an animal is going to be able to come and eat it. You also don't want to just set it out necessarily, because wind could just blow it right over. So that's why we included this hole. So again, 5 to 6 feet off the ground, away from where it's going to get knocked over, but somewhere where you can see it, because remember, these native bees that are going to be nesting inside of here, they don't have a hive like honeybees or a hive that's going to hang underneath like a wasp nest, and they don't live in those social groups, so they're not going to sting you because they don't have the same thing to protect. They just have these single little holes, and it's going to be like a little apartment complex of different bee species in here. So they're not going to come out and sting you. You can actually approach and watch them do their work about this close. As long as you're not harassing them or trying to poke them or prod them, you'll actually be able to get this close to these bees and watch them go in and out of their hives, out of their nest, and bring back leaves and pollen. And you'll be able to see them go in and out, and it's very interesting. So next we're going to talk about what we need to do to fill this bee nest. So a really great source is a lot of the native flora that we have in our state. So this is an old, broken, and it's just a dead milkweed stem. So what you can see is there's all these different nodes inside of a lot of these native plants. And so you can actually cut at the node and you'll see that it is actually hollow inside. So if you get some sharp scissors and cut this, you'll have your own native bee nesting material, because in the wild, they will actually use last year's stems to nest inside of anyway. And if you don't have milkweed, go find some seed and plant it in your garden and wait for it to sprout up. Once it's lost its leaves in the fall, you can harvest that for the next spring's bee nest. One of the best native plants that you can use for filling your stem nest block is what's called Joe Pye weed. It's a beautiful flower. It's actually not a weed, that's just its name, but it's wonderful because when you use the dead stems, they've got the perfect length, between 6 and 8 inches between the nodes. So there's the little back, so you don't have to create a back. It won't be hollow all the way through, it'll stop at each one of these nodes, and they're the perfect length. And so what you can do is they're also very hollow, and they vary in size. So you start at the thicker ones, you'd cut, and then you get a thinner one, you'd cut, and then you go smaller and smaller. So when you stack these up inside of your native bee nesting house, different species of bees will use these different size holes. So inside these Joe Pye weeds, you can see that they're already ready to be colonized by bees because they're hollow. And that's why this is such a great plant to use. Other plants that you can use, if you don't want to be filling a nest with these, you can literally, at the end of the winter, cut it to about 6 to 8 inches off the ground and just leave those hollow stems for the bees to colonize the next spring. It's the easiest way to make a bee nest. You don't even have to build one and hang it on your house. And remember, if you don't want to build a bee nest, you can actually go out in your garden and be able to see these bees nesting in their natural habitat. Because if you look at last year's growth, this is Black-Eyed Susan. Last year's growth, a lot of old stems will just naturally be hollow. And even though they're facing upwards, bees will nest inside of these, and you'll be able to see them flying in and out.